What's your I met a celebrity but didn't let on that I knew who they were story? My dad and I bumped into Michael Jordan at a Walgreens near Chicago. This was back in 2006 or so. We were picking out birthday cards for my mom, and MJ and his son came in the same aisle browsing some cards. My dad kept his cool and continued to look through different cards, giving him his personal space. I, on the other hand, was 9 years old and in awe, sort of staring at him. After MJ picked out his card, he winked at me and gave me a walk-by fist bump. Didn't really set in until I was older. How cool that was. I worked at a Barnes & Noble in New York as a clerk, but once or twice I'd be called over to the in-store Starbucks cafe to help out whenever they were understaffed. One time, Alan Rickman came up and ordered something. I can't recall what. I wrote Hans Gruber on his cup though. He smiled at me when he noticed it. Seems like the absolute best way to communicate I know who you are. I'm a big fan, but I also have the self-control to respect your time and personal space. You stay classy, Zeramig. I was in a bookstore in Ree and was in the horror section. Picked up a book by Stephen King and flipped it over and saw his picture on the back or inside the cover. I don't really remember. I look up and in the next aisle over, right across the bookshelf from me, is a guy that looks exactly like Stephen King. So I hold up the book and say, "Is this you?" "Yeah. Good books. Thanks." And that was that. My husband was vacationing in Arizona, killing time in a bar over a burger and a beer. A guy sits next to him, and my husband has a nice chat with him. The guy leaves, and my husband goes to close his tab and the bartender tells him it's been covered by the guy he was talking to. The bartender asks if he knows who he was talking to. My husband has no idea. Chuck Norris, it was his bar. I helped Steven Spielberg move his daughter's bags into her college dorm. I was working a shift helping first years move in, and I see a guy in a hat and sunglasses who is unmistakably Spielberg. I strike up a conversation, ask if he needs help with the bags, etc. First names only. We're from CA. My wife, Kate, and I sent all our kids to East Coast schools though. Stuff like that. Later, when his daughter opened the door for the first time, he whipped out a camcorder and, wearing the biggest dad grin, recorded the whole thing before turning the camera on my friend and me to ask us about the city. So, I have a supporting the luggage speaking role in a limited release home movie film shot by Steven Spielberg. Worked at a hotel and Russell Crowe came in the lobby. He went to the house phones and called front desk where I was working. I could see him pretty easily. I answered the phone and he asked to be connected to a room, so I put him through. This wasn't long after he threw a phone at a hotel clerk, so I didn't want to take a chance at pissing him off. I used to be a server at a Mexican restaurant right outside LA in the late 90s. One day Leonardo DiCaprio came in with who I assume was his mom to have lunch. This would been post-Titanic, so really at the peak of his breakthrough mega celeb status. He was wearing a bowl cap, sunglasses and unshaven, but I recognized him anyway. I didn't let anyone know, and I wrote something like, "Your movies are awesome. I hope you liked our food" on his receipt when I dropped it off at the table. After he left, I swung by and picked up his payment, and he had left me a note back that said, "Thank you so much for not blowing my cover with a $100 tip. Shit was awesome." I was only like 19. I went and got some PlayStation games with it after my shift ended. Was walking out of a gas station over on Crescent Heights and Sunset and heard a hey coming from a cracked window on tinted out Range Rover that was parked at one of the pumps. I walk over to the car to see Jeff Goldblum, who had somehow seen my gold ring I was wearing on my right hand from 20 feet away. He proceeds to tell me how he loves my ring and has been looking for one just like it, and asks me where I got it. I tell him it was my grandfather's, and he asks to see it up close. I hold my hand up to Jeff Goldblum. He takes my hand, gushes about the ring for a minute and thanks me. I said sure and walked back to my apartment. I like to think we are friends now. Samuel L. Jackson was on my flight. I was second to last to board the flight and there was all this commotion with the flight attendants and gate crew. Once I approached the door of the plane I realized they were all looking at Samuel L. Jackson. He was standing by the cockpit making himself available to passengers/fans. I played it cool. Didn't say a word. Turns out, I'm shy around celebrities. I'm just glad I didn't make a snakes on the plane joke. Was at a convenience store in LA when me and a very nicely dressed black gentleman walked up to the cashier at the same time to pay. It was nighttime, and he had his dark shades on and was talking on his phone. I gave him the after you gesture, and he nodded and said thanks buddy, paid and left. It wasn't until he was out of the store that I realized he was Jamie Foxx. About 40 years ago my father was sitting next to Telly Savalas at some Vegas blackjack table. For about an hour they talked and bet some large amounts of money, and my father never let on that he knew the guy was famous. Telly finally says, "It's pretty cool that you haven't asked for my autograph." My father responds, "Well, you didn't ask for mine." Telly laughs and writes on a cocktail napkin, "Hey, Jeff, can I have your autograph?" He carried that damn napkin with him for years. In the mid-90s I was a cab driver. Our service was like a cross between a limo and a taxi, and we serviced some fancy resorts. As I dropped off my passenger at a resort, another guy asks if I'm a taxi, and I say yes, so he tells his friend their cab is here. His friend got in the car and said this ain't no cab, smells too good to be a cab in that unmistakable Chris Rock voice. He and his friend just bullshitted with each other for the 15-minute drive to a local nightclub. There was a white kid trying to talk to a yellow cab driver ahead of us in the parking lot, and Chris Rock started imitating the kid. Like, "I need a ride. Yeah, I'm drunk, but I need a ride." And I was trying really hard not to laugh out loud. He wasn't nearly as famous yet at the time, but I had seen his stand-up routines on Comedy Central and knew exactly who he was, but didn't go fanboy on him. 10/10ths would drive Chris Rock again. Conan O'Brien. My college friend's dad owned an Irish restaurant in Manhattan, and she waitressed there back in the 1990s. She said he was super rude to the staff and was a bad tipper. One day a bunch of us were walking in the city and we saw him at a sidewalk cafe. We stopped and stared, and he noticed we were talking about him. My other friend went up to his table and asked him to take a picture of us and handed him her camera. His friends at the table had a huge laugh at his expense as we posed for a picture without him in it. We never let on we knew who he was. Now we all hold dear and sent a photo of us with a funny backstory. Not sure if this counts, but when I was 15 I was really into playing StarCraft, being a 3-month-old game at the time, on Battle.net. I did mostly 3v3 games. After finishing this one particularly epic match, close game, we won. We all got into a chat room to talk about how fun that was. One of them says something to the effect of, "Not sure if you all care, but you just beat Ben Affleck." Of course we all asked him to prove it, so he told us to wait a minute and visit his official website's message board, benaffleck.com or something like that. He had just made a post in Red being Ben Affleck himself, about just losing a game of StarCraft. We briefly chatted with him, and that was it. I was sitting at the Genius bar at an Apple store one day and a very large man with dreads came and sat next to me. He was bringing his phone in to get fixed because he dropped it and didn't have a case. I overheard an employee jokingly say, "You wear a helmet when you play football. Shouldn't your phone have the same protection?" I knew it was Larry Fitzgerald, but I didn't want to be a fanboy, so I started asking very broad questions about what he did as a profession to stay engaged in a conversation with him. Larry Fitz is, to this day, one of the nicest, most humble people I have ever met. I met Justin Timberlake and had no idea it was him until someone told me afterwards. Went to a basketball game with my dad, and we stopped by the bar area in the arena first. The game had just started, so it was pretty empty except for the bar itself. My dad goes to the restroom and I walk up to the bar to order a beer. There's only one seat at the bar next to a guy in a baseball cap and sunglasses. I politely ask if the seat is taken, and he just says nope, it's all you, man. We shoot the shit for a couple minutes. He's sitting on my right and eventually he says he and his wife are going to go to their seats. He extends his hand and asks my name. I tell him and ask his name. He says, "Justin. Nice to meet you, dude. Have a good night." He and his wife leave and the bartender comes up to me and says, "You know that was Justin Timberlake, right?" I immediately did a double take and couldn't believe I didn't recognize him even with the hat and sunglasses. I told my girlfriend at the time, who was a huge Justin Timberlake fan, and she couldn't believe I met him without knowing it was him. She wouldn't let it go for like a month.